The 10th insight. Still not even halfway through and mind fucking blown.
I'm like super excited to dive in because I'm like, what do I need? Like, it always has what I need to just like remember and be like, oh, that's right. See where it's going to direct us this week.
Right. It is such a personal journey, and it's really neat to be aware enough today to see that that's really the case everywhere. Like
Mhm.
everything that's happening is exactly what I needed, why I needed it. Now, just trying to understand and figure out some of that sometimes is a little bit more complicated,
Right.
but it's becoming more something that I put the energy into.
Yeah.
That's why that happened yesterday. Oh, that's why I feel this way today, you
Yeah.
know. Oh, that's why we're reading this.
Yeah. I know, like I'm in that space too. Like I said, this week at work has just been really, really hard. And it's tough because the last few weeks at work have been so good and easy and like, oh, I got a handle on this. And now all of a sudden this week has just been like, I can't keep up with my emails. I'm behind on a lot of things. We're going to start financials next week. I have to let somebody go. I have to let another person go. I have to be a hard ass at work. I have all of these trainings now that are taking up a lot of my time. And like softening into the allowing in that space has been a struggle for me. Allowing myself to quote unquote be behind. Can I let that story go? Can I let the I'm behind go of the I'm not doing enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not right. That's that underlying story that's woven into I'm behind or I can't catch up or you know.
Well, it's just like you were telling me yesterday that conversation you were having with the girls at work. You're already behind. Like, let's just
Mm,
figure out the processes to get a better flow, and
yeah.
then you be behind in the future. Like, can't panic that you're behind. Let's just whittle away and figure out the process that's going to speed it up to get it where we need it.
And we have those processes coming into place. That's why I'm behind because we're
Right.
integrating those processes.
Right.
And so like trying to manage all of it, trying to handle all of it or take on all of it. And it's that piece of just like I have all sorts of stuff loaded on my plate, yet I have so many people that need support. And so it's like, okay, like what do I do while maintaining my boundaries of okay, I'm going to stop work. I'm not going to put pressure on myself to work after 4. I'm not going to put pressure on myself to work on the weekends.
Right.
And I'm trying and working to maintain those boundaries, trusting that those boundaries are necessary. That if I do the work after hours, that's not going to serve and support me. And that's one of those, difficult things right now because, well, if I just do a few hours of work on Sunday, I just do a couple hours of work on Friday evening. If I just stay a little later, but I've cultivated a life in which I don't have the opportunity to stay later because I have things that I have responsibilities, I have commitments that I need to get to after the fact. And so, mhm.
Today's Friday for me.
Oh, yeah, you're gonna have so much fun. Uh,
Open to the knowledge.
yeah.
Damn. The first word in the
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Yep.
I thought lying flat on the rock, the coarse surface of the stone edge edging into my back. I was back at the stream again. For a long moment, I stared up at the gray sky, now threatening rain, listening to the water flow past me. I raised up on one elbow and looked around, noticing immediately that my body felt heavy and fatigued, just as it had the last time I left the other dimension. Clumsily, I got to my feet, a slight pain throbbing in my ankle, and limped back into the forest. I uncovered my pack and prepared some food, moving very slowly without thinking. Even as I ate, my mind remained surprisingly blank, like after a long meditation. Then slowly, I began to increase my energy, taking several deep breaths and holding them. Suddenly, I could hear the hum again. As I listened, another image came to mind. I was walking east in the direction of the sound, in search of its cause. The thought terrified me, and I felt the old urge to flee. Instantly, the hum vanished, and I heard the rustling of leaves to my rear. I jerked around and saw Maya. Do you always show up at the right time? I stammered. Show up? Are you crazy? I've been looking for you everywhere around here. Where did you come from? I was down by the stream. No, you weren't. I've been looking down there. She stared at me for a moment, then glanced at my foot. How's the ankle? I managed to smile. It's fine. Listen, I've got to talk to you about something. I have to speak with you too. There's something very strange happening. One of the Forest Service agents saw me walking into town last night, and I told him about your situation. He seemed to want to keep it quiet, and he insisted on sending a truck to get you this morning. I told him you were, I told him your general location, and he made a promise to ride out here, or the, and he made me a promise to ride out here with him this morning. Something about the way he was talking felt so odd. I decided to hike up ahead of him instead, but he'll probably be here any minute. Then we need to go, I said, scrambling to pack. Wait a minute. Tell me what is happening. She looked panicked. I stopped and faced her. Someone, I don't know who it is doing some kind of experiment or something like that here in the valley. I think my friend Charlene is involved somehow, or maybe in danger. Someone in the Forest Service must have secretly approved this. She stared, trying to take it all in. I picked up my pack and took her hand. Walk with me for a while. Please, there's more I need to tell you. She nodded and grabbed her pack. As we walked east along the edge of the stream, I told her the whole story. From meeting David and Will to seeing William's life review and listening to Joel. When I came to the point about her birth vision, I moved over to some rocks and sat down. She leaned against a tree to my right. You're involved in this too, I said. Obviously, you already know that your life is supposed to be about introducing alternative techniques of healing. But there's more that you intended to do. You're supposed to be a part of that group, a part of this group that Williams saw coming together. How do you know all that? Will and I saw your birth vision. She shook her head and closed her eyes. Maya, each of us comes here with the vision of how our lives can be what we want to do. The intuitions we have, the dreams, the coincidences, they're all designed to keep us on the right path, to bring back our memory of how we wanted our lives to unfold. And what else did I want to do? I don't know exactly. I couldn't get it. But it had something to do with this collective fear that is rising in human consciousness. The experiment is a result of this fear. Maya, you intended to use what you've learned about physical healing to help resolve what's happening in this valley. You must remember. She stood and looked away. Oh no, you can't put that kind of responsibility on me. I don't remember any of this. I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing as a doctor. I hate this kind of intrigue. Understand? I hate it. I finally have the clinic set up just as I want it. You can't expect me to get involved in all this. You've got the wrong person. Boy, do I relate to that feeling of no, that's not it. I hold on, that's not it. Because I got the plan and I know the plan.
Well, my relation is to that you've got the wrong person. Like I've had all these ideas and visions throughout my life of, oh, somebody should do this, right? Like somebody that is well equipped, somebody that has the tenacity, somebody that has the bravery or the skills or the whatever. And all of these visions that I'm now living right now were things that I thought were for somebody else.
Right.
Like, that's too big for me. There's no way I can do that. There's no way, and there's still times where it feels like that, where it's like, maybe I'm the fucking wrong person for this. Like, I don't have the finances. I don't have the fucking know-how. I don't have the fucking whatever of like, this would be so much easier for somebody else,
Right.
you know?
Right. I looked at her, trying to think of something else to say. During the silence, I heard the hum again. Can you hear that sound, Maya? A dissonance in the air, a hum. That's the experiment. It's happening right now. Try to hear it. She listened for a moment, then said, I don't hear anything. I grabbed her arm, trying to raise her energy. She pulled away. I don't hear a hum. I took a breath. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not supposed to happen this way. She looked at me for a moment. I know someone with the sheriff's department. I'll try to get you in touch with him. I'll try to get in touch with him for you. That's all I can do. I don't know if that will help, I said. Apparently, not everyone can hear this sound. Do you want me to call him? Yes, but tell him to investigate independently. I'm not sure he can trust everyone in the Forest Service. I picked up my pack again. I hope you understand, she said. I just can't be involved in this. I feel as though something horribly would happen. But that's just because of what happened when you tried this before, in the 9th century, here in the valley. Can you remember any of that? She closed her eyes again, not wanting to listen. I suddenly saw a clear image of myself in buckskins running up a hill, pulling a pack horse. It was the same image I had seen before. The mountain man was me. As the vision continued, I made my way to the top of the hill and then paused to glance back to my rear. From there, I could see the falls and the gorge on the other side. There was Maya and the Indian and the young congressional aide. As before, the battle was just beginning. Anxiety swept over me, and I pulled at the horse and walked on, unable to help them avoid their fate. I shook off the images. It's okay, I said, giving up. I know how you feel. Maya walked closer. Here's some extra water and food I brought. What are you planning to do? I'm going to head toward the east, for at least a while. I know Charlene was going in that direction. She looked at my foot. Are you sure your ankle will hold up? I moved closer and said, I haven't really thanked you for what you did. My ankle will be fine. I think. It's just a little sore. I guess I'll never know how bad it might have been. When it happens this way, no one ever does. I nodded, then picked up my pack and headed east, glancing back at Maya. She looked guilty for an instant, and then an expression of relief swept across her face. And it passed.
I walked toward the sound of the hum, keeping the stream in sight to my left, pausing only to rest my foot. About noon, the sound ceased, so I stopped to eat lunch and assess the situation. My ankle was swelling slightly, and I rested for an hour and a half before resuming my journey. After covering only another mile, fatigue overwhelmed me, and I rested again. By mid-afternoon, I was looking for a place to camp. I had been walking through thick woods that grew right to the edge of the stream, but ahead the landscape opened up in a series of gentle rolling foothills covered with old-growth forest, 300- and 400-year-old trees. Through a break in the limbs, I could see a large ridge rising toward the southeast, perhaps another mile away. I spotted a small grassy knoll near the top of the first hill, which looked like a perfect place to spend the night. As I approached, movement in the trees caught my eye. I slipped behind a large outcropping and looked. What was that? A deer? A person? I waited for several minutes, then carefully moved away toward the north. As I inched along, I saw a large man 100 yards to the south of the knoll. I had seen before, apparently setting up a camp himself. Staying very low to the ground and moving with skill, he deftly raised a small tent and camouflaged it with branches. For an instant, I thought it might be David, but his movements were different, and he was too big. Then I lost sight of him. After waiting for several more minutes, I decided to move farther to the north until I was completely out of sight. I had been moving no more than 5 minutes when the man suddenly stepped out in front of me. "Who are you?" he asked. I told him my name and decided to be open. "I'm trying to find a friend." "It's dangerous out here," he said. "I would recommend that you go back. This is all private property." "Why are you out here?" I asked. He was silent, staring. Then I remembered that what David had told me. "Are you Curtis Weber?" I inquired. He looked at me for a moment longer, then abruptly smiled. "You know David Lone Eagle." "I only talked to him briefly, but he told me you were out here and to tell you he was coming into the valley and that he would find you." Curtis nodded and looked toward his camp. "It's getting late and we need to get out of sight. Let's go up to my tent. You can spend the night up there." I followed him down a slope and up into the deep cover of the larger trees. While I pitched my tent, he fired up his camp stove for coffee and opened a can of tuna. I contributed a package of bread Maya had given me. "You mentioned you are here looking for someone," Curtis said. "Who?" I briefly told him about Charlene's disappearance and that David had seen her hiking into the valley. Also, that I thought she had been coming in this direction. I didn't talk about what had occurred in the other dimension, but I did mention hearing the hum and seeing the vehicles. The hum, he responded, comes from an energy generating device. Someone's experimenting with it here for some reason. I can confirm that much, but I don't know whether the experiment is being conducted by some secret government agency or a private group. Most of the service forest agents seem to be unaware that it's happening, but I don't know about the administrators. "Have you gone to the media," I asked, "or to the local authorities about this?" "Not yet. The fact that not everyone hears the hum is a real problem." He looked out at the valley. "If I just knew where they were." Counting the private land in the national forest, there are tens of thousands of acres where they might be. I think they want to conduct the experiment and get out before anyone knows what happened. That is, if they can avoid a tragedy. "What do you mean?" "They could totally ruin this place, make it into a twilight zone, another Bermuda Triangle where the laws of physics are in unpredictable flux." He looked directly at me. "The things they know how to do are incredible. Most people have no idea of the complexity of electromagnetic phenomena. In the latest superstring theories, for instance, one has to assume this radiation emanates across 9 dimensions just to make the math work. This device has the potential to disrupt these dimensions. It could trigger massive earthquakes or even complete physical disintegration of certain areas." "How do you know all this?" I asked. His face fell. "Because in the decade of the 80s, I helped develop some of this technology. I was employed with a multinational corporation I thought was named Deltec. Although later, after I was fired, I found out that Deltec was a fictitious name." "You've heard of Nikola Tesla?" "Well, we expanded many of his theories and tied some of his discoveries to other technologies that the company supplied. The funny thing is that this technology is composed of several dissimilar parts, but basically it works this way. Imagine that the electromagnetic field of the Earth is a giant battery that can provide plenty of electrical energy if you can tie into it in the correct way. For that, you combine a room temperature superconductive generator system with a very complicated electronic feedback inhibitor, which mathematically enhances certain static output resonances. Then you tie several of these in a series, amplifying and generating the charge. And when you get the calibrations exact, presto, you have virtually free energy right out of the immediate space. You need a small amount of power to start, perhaps a single photocell or a battery, but then it's self-perpetuating. A device the size of a heat pump could power several houses, even a small factory. However, there are two problems. First, calibrating these mini generators is unbelievably complicated. We had access to some of the largest computers in existence and couldn't do it. Second, we discovered that when we tried to increase the total output beyond this relatively small size of enlarging the mass displacement, by enlarging the mass displacement, the space around the generator became very unstable and began to warp. We didn't know it then, but we were tapping into the energy of another dimension, and strange things began to happen. Once we made the whole generator disappear exactly like what happened in the Philadelphia experiment. Do you think they really made a ship disappear and show up again in a new location in 1943? Of course they did. There's a lot of secret technology around, and they're smart. In our case, they were able to shut our team down in less than a month and fire all of us without a breach of security because each team was working on an isolated part of the technology. Not that I wondered much about it then. I mostly bought the idea that the obstacles were just too great to proceed, so I thought it was dead-end research. Although I did hear that several of the old employees were hired again by another company. He looked thoughtful for a moment, then continued. I knew I wanted to do something else anyway. I'm a consultant now, working with small technology firms, providing advice for improving their research efficiency and use of resources and disposal of wastes, that sort of thing. And the more I work with them, the more I'm convinced the insights are having an effect on the economy. The way we do business is shifting. But I figured we had to work with traditional power sources for a long time. I hadn't thought about the energy experiments in years until I moved into this area. You can imagine how shocked I was to walk into this valley and hear the same sound, this characteristic hum that I heard every day for years when we were working on the project. Someone has continued the research, and judging from the resonances, they're much further along than we were. Afterward, I tried to contact the two people who could verify the sound and maybe go to the EPA or a congressional committee with me, but I found out one had been deceased for 10 years and the other, my best friend when I was at the corporation, was also dead. He had a heart attack just yesterday. His voice trailed off. Since then, he went on, I've been out here listening, trying to figure out where in the valley. Ordinarily, one would expect this kind of experiment to be done in a laboratory somewhere. I mean, why not? Its energy source is space itself, and that's everywhere. But then it dawned on me. They must think they are very close to perfecting the calibrations, which means they're working on the amplification problem. I think they're trying to tie into the energy vortices in this valley in an attempt to stabilize the process. A wave of anger crossed his face, which is crazy and totally unnecessary. If they really can find the calibration, then there's no reason not to utilize the technology in small units. In fact, that's the perfect way of using it. What they're trying now is insane. I know enough to see the dangers. I'm telling you, they could totally wreck this valley or worse. If they focus this thing on the interdimensional pathways, who knows what might happen. He stopped suddenly. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you heard of the insights? I stared for a moment, then said, Curtis, I have to tell you what I've been experiencing in this valley. You may find it unbelievable. He nodded and then listened patiently as I described meeting Will and exploring parts of other dimensions. When I came to the life review, I asked, this friend of yours who recently died, was his name Williams? That's right, Dr. Williams. How did you know that? We saw him reach the other dimension after his death. We watched as he experienced a life review. He appeared shaken. That's hard for me to believe. I know the insights, at least intellectually, and I believe in the probable existence of other dimensions. But as a scientist, the ninth insight stuff is much harder to take literally. The idea of being able to communicate with people after death. You're saying that Dr. Williams is still alive in the sense that his personality is intact? Yes, and he was thinking about you. He looked at me intently as I continued to tell him about William's realization that Curtis and he were supposed to be involved in resolving the fear and stopping this experiment. I don't understand, he said. What did he mean when he talked about a growing fear? I don't know exactly. It has to do with a certain percentage of the population refusing to believe that a new spiritual awareness is emerging. Instead, they think human civilization is degenerating. This is creating a polarization of opinion and belief. Human culture can't continue to evolve until the polarization is ended. I was hoping that you might remember something about it. That right there, like in the acquisition of this company, we walked in and that's exactly what it was. Like every single person in that building, in that company, had this, it was this just palpable fear that was expressed as harshness, as abrasiveness, as just being cold and um, this outlook on the world of and just life in general of like misery. And it was just so depleting. And then like the last person that really is harnessing that energy, it has left. She put her notice in. And it's like such a huge shift to like now, instead of that being the norm, there's little pockets of it, like how I was describing my experience with one of my managers the other day, where it's like that's no longer the norm. There's little pockets of it that I get to need out and remind the team, like, no, this isn't bad, this isn't wrong, this isn't that, but to like remind them of like, we are moving in this beautiful direction. Like you get to choose yourself, reminding them to choose themselves, reminding them that it's safe to do that, reminding them of all these things, but like just that discernment between the fear, the growing fear, and then this vision of expansion, of growth, of whatever we want to call it, is so polarizing. And it's so, just so like easy for me to experience and discern now. And that's part of like that that feeling of like that I get from Kylie is just thick of that like, and I don't know if fear is the right word, but just this dissonant tension. And like it's wild to really be able to associate that here in my life, of being able to discern those differences of feeling that resistance and that dissonance coming from people and like the way they speak or the way they view the world or the way they live in their life. And because I can feel that now, because I lived that for so many years, it's only been the last few years where it's like, oh no, the world isn't out to get me.
Hmm.
I'm not living in a trauma response anymore. I don't feel like I have to survive. I don't feel like the world is hell, you know? I know it can be. I know it is hell, but now I'm like walking into the heaven on earth phase of like, oh shit, this exists too. It's not one or the other. Like, yes, you get to live in your own personal hell if you want to. I'm not going to take that away from you. And I'm going to live in my own personal heaven because I've lived in my own personal hell for 38 years. I'm done. And now I get to weave out those parts. And I think it's the whole work thing. As I get to support people as they weave those parts out of themselves, it reminds me to do the same for me of like, I'm in this space. It's not this space that is hell. It's the stories I tell about it
Hmm.
and the perception I have, what I choose to live in. And so it's just going at a deeper level of unweaving those stories in that own personal hell. And at some point, maybe it'll end with me leaving the job. Like that's very apparent. And that's an option that's always on the table. Um, But right now, it's so much of an internal work of, all right, like this story gets to, bless in peace. This identity, this belief, this whatever doesn't fit anymore. Is this, something that is creating my own personal hell or creating my own personal heaven? Which one do I want? And
That gets to be a choice.
yeah. He looked at me blankly. I don't know anything about a polarization, but I am going to stop this experiment. His face grew angry again, and he looked away. Williams seemed to understand the process for stopping it, I said. Well, we'll never know now, will we? As he said that, I fleetingly saw again the image of Curtis and Williams talking on the grassy hilltop surrounded by several large trees. Curtis served our food, still appearing upset, and we finished eating in silence. Later, as I stretched out and leaned against a small hickory, I glanced up the hill at the grassy knoll above us. 4 or 5 huge oaks made almost a perfect semicircle on its crest. Why didn't she camp up on that hill? I asked Curtis, pointing. I don't know, he said. The idea came to me, but I guess I thought it was too exposed or maybe too powerful. It's called Cotter's Knoll. Do you want to walk up there? I nodded and rose to my feet. A gray twilight was descending across the forest. Commenting on the beauty of the trees and shrubs as we walked, Curtis led the way up the slope. At the top, in spite of the fading light, we could see almost a quarter of a mile toward the north and east. In the latter direction, a near full moon was rising above the tree line. Better sit down, Curtis advised. We don't want to be seen. For a long while, we sat in silence, admiring the view and feeling the energy. Curtis took a flashlight out of his pocket and laid it on the ground beside him. I was mesmerized by the colors of the fall foliage. Presently, Curtis looked over at me and asked, "Do you smell something? Smoke?" I immediately looked out at the woods, suspecting a forest fire, and sniffed the air. No, I don't think so. Something about Curtis's demeanor was shifting the mood, introducing a feeling of sadness or nostalgia. What kind of smoke do you mean? Cigar smoke. In the growing moonlight, I could tell he was smiling reflectively, thinking about something. Then suddenly I began to smell the smoke. What is that? I asked, looking round again. He caught my eye. Dr. Williams smoked cigars that smelled just like that. I can't believe he's gone. As we talked, the smell subsided and I dismissed the whole experience, content to stare out at the sage and the large oaks beside us. In that moment, I realized that this was the very spot where William saw himself meeting with Curtis. It was to take place right here. Seconds later, I observed a figure forming just beyond the trees. Do you see something out there? I quietly asked Curtis, pointing in that direction. As soon as I spoke, the form disappeared. Curtis was straining to see what? I don't see anything. I didn't respond. Somehow I began to intuitively receive knowledge, exactly as I had received it from the soul group, except the connection was more distant and garbled. I could sense something about the energy experiment, a confirmation of Curtis's suspicions. The experimenters were indeed attempting to focus on the dimensional vortices. I just remembered, Curtis said abruptly. One of the devices Dr. Williams was working on years ago was a remote focus, a dish projection system. I bet that's what they're using to focus on the openings. But how do they know where the openings are? Immediately, I perceived an answer. Someone of a higher awareness pointed them out until they learned the spatial variances as they showed up on the remote focus computer. I had no idea what that meant. There's only one way, Curtis said. They would have to find someone to point them out, someone who could sense these higher energy locations. Then they could map out an energy profile of the site and focus precisely by scanning with a focus beam. Probably the individual wouldn't even know what they were doing. He shook his head. These people are vicious. There's no doubt about it. How could they do this? As if in response, I sensed another knowledge that was too vague to understand completely, but seemed to maintain that there was, in fact, a reason. But we had to first understand the fear and how to overcome it. When I looked at Curtis, he seemed to be deep in thought. Finally, he looked at me and said, I wish I knew why this fear was coming up now. And with that, I think I'm going to pass.
During a transition in culture, I said, old certainties and views began to break down and evolve into new traditions, causing anxiety in the short run. At the same time, that some people are waking up and sustaining an inner connection of love that sustains them and allows them to evolve more rapidly. Others feel as though everything is changing too fast and that we're losing our way. They become more fearful and more controlling, trying to raise their energy. This polarization of fear can be very dangerous, but because fearful people can rationalize extreme measures. Fuck,
Ooh,
that's not what we're living. God damn.
that is so true. It reminds me of this thing that at the first burn that Steve said, well, he was deep in medicine and he doesn't remember saying it, but or maybe I just heard it. I don't know. But he said, we are the most dangerous when we don't know how powerful we are. And that's the truth, because when we don't know how powerful we are, we do everything we can to prove how powerful we are, not knowing that that power is causing the pain, not knowing how powerful we are, not knowing how much of an impact we make through our words, through our actions, through our choices, through our beliefs. Like I was just saying, creating our own hell. And in turn, on the people that are figuring this out or walking in unawareness and unsure and not tapped in, tuned in, turned on to themselves, they pull them in with them. I mean, Hitler, that was Hitler. He didn't know how powerful he was, so he had to prove it. Gathering a following of people that believed his intensity, his power so much, while he didn't. All of that, the genocides, the skinnings of the Native Americans, the fucking abuse, the sex trafficking, all of this is people who don't realize how fucking powerful they are. So they have to prove it. When if we just take a minute and fucking accept that we are powerful, how different would our choices be?
Right, right. And how much less energy would we be putting into that effort?
Yeah. We wouldn't have to we wouldn't have to put forth any energy. We simply be, and the energy expands on its own. We focus, it we do reciprocity, right? The first 9 insights tells us how to tap into that energy within ourself, utilizing nature, expanding our energy, bringing our own energy up instead of trying to manipulate and control and tear down other people to feel more powerful. That was such a shift. Realize, and that was like such a hard fucking awareness of the fact that the only way I would allow myself, I could feel powerful is by tearing other people down to make them less powerful, make them less than.
Right.
The constant uh shaming and guilting and passive aggressive remarks and weaving in how little they are into my conversation without actually saying it. The
Mm-hmm.
gaslighting, all of it, making them feel less than, making them feel unworthy, making them feel worthless so I could feel better
Right.
instead of how I approach life now of the supporting and the lifting. You rise, I rise. I rise, you rise. That's how this works. It's not a competition. It's no longer, if I'm right, then that makes you wrong, and I have to fix you and tell you you're wrong. Or if you're right and I'm wrong, then I need to fix me and make me unbroken, whatever the fuck. No, you're right. I'm right. We get to rise together.
Right. Yeah. It's an effort to remember that. It's actually a very beautiful practice though. I mean, it's kind of what I've been walking through. Like I don't in all kinds of cases, like I know how to point out what's wrong or what I'm feeling or what, what's going on. But in it's never been in healthy ways. It's never been, that's why that whole conversation last night of like, I don't even want to say
Yeah.
what I'm feeling because I don't want to be attacking. And what I'm feeling, if I verbalize it, is
Mhm.
attacking. And so this is my work,
Yeah.
not the work of the conversation,
Yeah.
and living in that and practicing that pause and then letting that settle and then letting the work be done in here because that was a meditation practice I remember learning early on. I had a meditation teacher because all of our focuses, all of the online and apps were teaching that concept of meditating, bringing in the good, bringing in the the good thoughts and releasing the bad thoughts. We're transformative people. We have grown into, or we actually are by nature transformative. Take in the bad thoughts and let out the good thoughts. You can do that in yourself. And when
Yeah.
I shifted that in my meditation practice, my whole practice changed.
Yeah.
When I'm able to be the healer, we're fucking healers by nature.
Hmm.
We don't remember. We're blocked. We have all these blocks, whether they're societal or personal or trauma or family or whatever, all these blocks that I need a healer. No, you are the healer.
Yes.
Transform it yourself and give out the good, bring in the bad. Yeah. Yeah,
That is
powerful
the
thought.
essence of what I was describing holding space in medicine is, or working with clients, or how I'm working with the people at the office.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's that song, right? No, it's not good vibes only, it's all vibes.
Yeah.
It's all vibes. Let me be the alchemist. Let me alchemize. I am doing my work, not just so I can live in my own personal heaven, but so I can do the work in alchemizing the energy that's being emitted. That experience that I shared with you about Sunday and the biker.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, give me your range and I will reflect back to you how brave you are for sharing that with me and that you are loved exactly as you are right here, right now, in all of the ways that you believe you are not.
Okay.
I will reflect back to you what I see because I have done the work to see myself in those spaces as holy and sacred and worthy and lovable. And then now I get to show up for you in that way. And in a moment,
Everything
he
changes.
shifted.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
like, oh, fuck, I don't have to prove myself to her. She knows that I'm worthy. She knows that I am sacred. I no
Right.
longer have to take the extreme measures to let her know, right? It's safe here. And that's that beauty. That's where we get to walk out into this world and be leaders. That's the essence of the 9 ways of being. That's the essence of these 6 core practices. So we can learn how to be the alchemists. I'm not here to heal you. I will not heal you. I will sit here and I will witness you and I will support you and I will hold space for you while you learn how to access the inner healer that you are. And I will reflect back to you what you aren't able to see right now until you are able to see it.
Hmm. As I was saying all this, I felt as though I was expanding on what I had earlier heard Will say and Williams. But I also had the distant sensation that something I knew all along, but I didn't realize until this very moment. I understand that Curtis said with certainty, that's why these people are so willing to waste this valley. They rationalize that civilization will fall apart in the future and they won't be safe unless they seize more control. Well, I'm not going to allow it to happen. I'll blow the whole thing sky high. I looked at him. What do you mean? Just that. I used to be a a demolitions expert. I know how. I must have looked alarmed because he said, "Don't worry. I'll figure out a way to do it where no one gets hurt. I wouldn't want that on my conscience. A wave of knowledge filled me. Any kind of violence, I said, just makes it worse. Don't you see?
Mhm.
That's fuck. As I read that
Goosebumps.
paragraph before, like that's that that's that piece of me that I've put so much work into releasing. You know what I mean? Because I do have that. It's all gonna fall apart. It's all a fucking mess. It's all you and I have gone deep into this conversation, and that is just putting more fuel in the fire. That is just being I'm watching that with my brother-in-law. Like my aggression, because of his aggression, has caused us nothing, has benefited us nothing.
Yeah.
And learning in those situations that today the situations look a lot different. Now, not with him, because I just choose not to be a part of that. But being able to be, I don't know, a lot more calm in these spaces and not have to, I'm gonna blow it up, because that's what I know how to do. That's the thought process I know how to have. So it's that unlearning and then relearning with the
Yeah, and really coming to that understanding of, like, how do I stand for all life while standing against none and no one, right? Because if we want, like, v- being violent against violence only amplifies the violence. Hating the hatred only amplifies the hatred. Raging at the rage only amplifies the rage. And here's the thing though, is that like that's that piece is all of these things, the hate, the rage, the violence, all of it can be poison and also can be medicine. Just like the compassion and the acceptance and those aspects can be poison just as much as they are medicine. And it's a matter of understanding how we utilize those energies. The rage and the hate and the anger and the violence, all of that is intense energy, and intense energy can be beautiful in creation. Again, bringing back to the alchemy.
right.
There is a point in the ceremony with Troy where I began sharing about, because I had mentioned something as like all of the core experiences are the same. Grief, we all know what grief feels like. Fear, we all know what fear feels like. And it may be a different flavor. It may have different toppings on it, or it may have a different story woven into it to express it or to describe how we came to know that core experience, but it's all the same. And Troy was like, I don't know if I accept that. And so I shared the experience I had about holding space for the people in Gaza. And my energy and my emotions like got intensified. Just in general, like nobody deserves that. Nobody. And then she had paused me for a moment. She's like, I hope you don't see the world that way. It was like, here's the thing. I was like, this energy that I feel is what motivates me and pushes me when I can't see the reason to keep going on. When I can't see the changes that what I do and the energy I put forth are making, is that there are still people out there that don't realize that every life is sacred. There are still people out there that don't walk in this world treating this world and the people in it as sacred. It was like the balance in understanding how to move with that is where my wisdom is kicking in. Because before it would be yelling it from the rooftops. Before it would be shaming all the people who aren't doing anything. Before it would be pointing out the flaws in everybody's logic and how they're thinking. It's like, but that is only doing exactly the thing that I'm working towards stopping.
Right. Right.
It's like, so now it's being able to harness that energy and know that every time I get up and look in the mirror and tell myself I love you, I'm doing the work. I am embodying the change that I want to see in this world. That every time I hold this space and make space, allow space, create space for people to speak what they love about themselves, that right there is doing the work. That every time I soften in the places I was rigid and hard and harsh is me doing the work. That's that difference.
Right.
And it's hard to see that as the work sometimes. How can me laughing and playing and having fun and enjoying myself be valuable in making a difference in this world? How can me making space for others to laugh and play and enjoy themselves be good enough to make an impact in this world?
Yeah. What other way is there? Out of the corner of my eye, I glimpsed the form again in an instant, and then it disappeared. I don't know exactly, I said, but if we fight them with anger, hate, just see an enemy, they just see an enemy. It makes them more entrenched. They become more fearful. Somehow, this group that Williams was talking about is supposed to do something else. We're supposed to fully remember our birth visions, and then we can remember something more, a world vision. Somehow I knew the term, but I couldn't remember where I had heard it before. A world vision? Protus pondered, deep in thought again. I think David Loningle mentioned this. Yes, I said, that's right. What do you think a world vision is? I was about to say I didn't know when a thought came to me. It's an understanding. No, a memory of how we fulfill the human purpose. It brings another level of love and energy that can bridge the polarization and end this experiment. I don't see how that's possible, Curtis said. It evolves the energy around the people who are in fear. I said, somehow knowing. They would be touched, awakened from their preoccupation. They would choose to stop. For several moments we were silent. Then Curtis said, maybe, but how do we bring in this energy? Nothing more came to mind. I wish I knew how far they're prepared to go with this experiment, he added. What causes the hum? I asked. The hum is a linking dissonance between the small generators. It means that they're still trying to calibrate the device. The more grating and disharmonious it is, the more it's out of phase. He thought for a moment. I just wonder which energy vortex they're going to focus on. I suddenly sensed a particular nervousness, not within myself, but outwardly, as if I was around someone else who was anxious. I looked at Curtis, who seemed relatively calm. Beyond the trees again, I saw vague outlines of a form. It moved as if agitated or frightened. I would imagine, Curtis said abruptly, that if one were close to the target location, one would hear the hum and then feel kind of static electricity in the air. We looked at each other, and then in silence, I could hear a faint sound, merely a vibration. Do you hear that? Curtis asked, now alarmed. As I looked at him, I felt the hair rise on the back of my neck and forearms. What is this? For an instant, Curtis observed his own arms, then looked at me in horror. We got to get out of here, he screamed, grabbing his flashlight, leaping to his feet, half dragging me off the crest of the slope. Suddenly, the same ear-shattering roar I had heard with Will descended again and carried it with a shock wave that knocked both of us to the ground. Simultaneously, the earth beneath us shook violently, and a massive fissure opened 20 feet away, creating an explosion of dust and debris. Behind us, one of the towering oaks, undermined by the shifting earth, leaned and then fell to the ground in a thunderous roar, adding to the noise. Seconds later, another large fissure tore open right behind us and the ground tilted. Curtis, unable to hold on, slid toward the winding abyss. I held onto a small bush and then reached out for Curtis. For a moment, we held tight. Then our grip slipped, and I watched helplessly as he slid over the edge. The fissure moved and widened, spewed another plume of dust and rock, shook once more, and then was still. A limb under the fallen tree cracked loudly, and then the night was again silent. As the dust cleared, I let go of the bush and crawled toward the edge of the massive hole. When I could see, I realized that Curtis was lying prone at the edge, even though I was sure I had seen him fall in. He rolled toward me. Let's go, he yelled. It could start again. Without speaking, we ran down the hill toward the campsite. Curtis ahead, me limping behind. When Curtis reached the site, he seized both tents and ripped them from the ground, stingling, and stuffed them into packs. I pushed in the other gear, and we continued toward the southwest until the ground flattened into thick underbrush. Another half a mile. After another half mile, exhaustion and my weakening ankle forced me to stop. Curtis surveyed this terrain. Maybe we'll be safe here, he said, but let's move deeper into the thicket. I followed as he led us 50 feet further into the dense woods.
I say this is a good stopping point. It is 7.
We are so close. This will do right here.
Yeah. Perfect.
There it is. Right on. Good shit, man.
It really is. Like, I'm looking forward to my drive to work to contemplate this. And there's so much given to me as I walk into this space that I've, regularly found difficulty in holding the vibration, holding the vision. And it's like it's like holding that vision. Like I held that vision with my relationship with the kid's dad. I've held the vision of how to connect with, in different relations and how love can truly be experienced and expressed in this life. And like I get to hold the vision with my business, with the work that I do in the business that I work for. And it's that space of like holding the vision and getting a clearer vision of what it could be, like what I know it could be, and maintaining that vision even when what the outside world is showing me doesn't match.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. In all aspects of my life. Yeah. Totally.
Mhm. What a beautiful way to start the day.
Yes, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah.